Well, good morning and welcome back to Brightside on this Wednesday, November the 7th, the day after Election Day. We want to go to CBS in New York right now. Ed O'Keefe is standing by in their CBS studios there. Ed, good morning. Thanks for being with us today. I want to get right into it. Democrats have retaken the House for the first time in 8 years, but there were a lot of big Republican wins on Tuesday, especially here in the state of Florida. So what happened to this blue wave that we were supposed to get?
Well, Rob, we could spend the whole morning finding the definition of a wave, but this much we know. Democrats took control of the House and did it with at least, or roughly, we think at the end, ultimately about 30 seats, maybe a little more than that. Look, waves are generally defined as anything that makes significant changes in control of one or the other chamber, and we saw that last night. Democrats able to retake it and take it with a comfortable margin by doing it in races all across the country, and in some cases races that we didn't even see coming in the suburbs of places like Oklahoma, some parts of Texas where gains haven't been made by Democrats in generations. Sure, they came up short in Florida. There were as many as perhaps 5 or 6 races that Democrats had their eye on. They only got 2, and probably the easiest 2 to get. But Florida seems to have had a pretty good Republican night, and I think that's going to be a situation worth exploring more deeply. Either way, Democrats in charge of the House, Republicans in charge of the Senate, that leads to an entirely different dynamic in Washington.
Yeah, Ed, you're certainly right there. 13 million plus registered voters in Florida, 8.2 million people casting a ballot yesterday in the state of Florida. Unbelievable numbers. And right now, we're not totally sure what the result will be, but it looks like Rick Scott has beat Bill Nelson. They're separated by less than 0.5% of the vote here in the state of Florida, which could trigger a possible recount. We'll learn more about that today, but what are you hearing? And could a recount potentially change the result?
Well, we've seen recounts and change results in Florida before, certainly, and so it's always possible. And I think both sides are probably wise to wait there for the overseas military ballots, the other absentee ballots that may come in. Why did this happen? Talked to some Democrats last night who say that perhaps the numbers for Gillum, at least, especially in the governor's race, could have been better in his native South Florida, and that might have helped give a lift to Bill Nelson and allow him to hold on. Others will point to the fact that early on and throughout his 8 years as governor, Rick Scott always did a good job of reaching out to Latino voters in Florida, and that may have made a difference. He won about 44% of the Hispanic vote across Florida. That's a good number for a Republican running statewide, and led to bad numbers for both Democrats in those statewide races. Lessons to be learned there for Democrats running not only in Florida but across the country, that they've got to do more early on to reach out to Latino voters and help lift their numbers.
Ed, we had to look it up. The last time that Florida had 2 Republican senators and a Republican governor was 1875. So it's been quite a while, and we'll see if this election is a bellwether of things to come in 2020. But the race for 2020 is already on. Does this at all change who the Democratic candidate could be against Donald Trump in 2 years?
You know, it very well could, because there were arguments being made by Andrew Gillum there in Florida and Stacey Abrams just to the north that if you ran more liberal Democratic candidates, perhaps you'd be able to draw out more Democratic voters, and the middle of the electorate be darned. They didn't succeed last night, and you did see some centrists in other states pull it off. So there's going to be this sort of existential argument among Democrats. Do we run someone who's slightly more liberal? Do we run someone who's willing to hew to the middle and try to win over independent voters and maybe some Republicans? And that's going to lead to a really spirited fight among Democrats over who should take on Donald Trump. But this much we also know. Because they were able to win governorships in several Midwestern states, make some gains out west as well, because they were able to elect more Democrats into House seats across the country, it helps the party rebuild and prepare for important races and important primaries and battles in swing states. Where they came up short and will they'll be awfully disappointed is the fact that at this point now they're robbed of anything in Florida, which of course is always such an important state in presidential elections.
And it will be in 2 years. That is Ed O'Keefe reporting for us in New York City. Ed, thank you so much for your time this morning.